Evening, everybody. Hopefully we're up and running. Had a bit of a fun start there to the whole world of Instagram Live. So with a little luck, we should be joined by Orsola de Castro in a second now, all things being well. I'm the first to say technology is not my strong suit, but it's brilliant to see people joining, so thank you so much. And with that, we have Orsola, and we're just going to join Orsola. And we're just waiting now. There we go, Orsola.
Hello.
We're up and running. How about that? So
Brilliant.
after all of our extensive testing,
I hope it stays. I tell you, I hope it stays. I'm finding in London with lockdown, it seems that so many people use, Wi-Fi at the same time that it's kind of it feels a bit dodgy technology. But here we are.
Absolutely. Well, yeah, that's the point. I mean, here we are. What an amazing moment, really, and what a sort of unique moment for us all as people, and of course globally.
Yeah.
And I just really want to obviously say thank you for joining us this evening. This is our second episode of RÄBURN Connects, and yeah, really, this is an opportunity in the right way for us to discuss, I think, some key topics. And importantly, it's not just about you and I, Ursula. The really key thing here is that the wonderful world that we live in terms of technology now, it's fantastic to see so many people joining. I've just seen Suzanne joining, Suzanne Typhota. Yeah, exactly. And
Old friend.
I suppose this is, as I mentioned, a very unique moment. And what we want to really do is really just talk about our obligation, really, to use this time wisely, I think, because we're very aware that this is a very serious moment for us as people, and we don't in any way want to belittle that. I think it's really important to acknowledge the fact that things are very hard for a lot of people, but our job as creatives is to be exactly that, be creative and really look for solutions. And the topic this evening, and what we're hoping really to achieve together, is to discuss disruption. And at the moment, I think that's something we're all experiencing globally. And then really, yeah, absolutely. And then really start to think to ourselves, well, through this period that we're going through within the fashion industry, what maybe is going to be the way that we should really be looking at this disruption, and what's our obligation, and maybe what's the potential, if those are the right sort of words. Yeah. And that's the overall thing as people continue to join. But importantly, I just wanted really to just to hear from yourself a little bit about your background. Of course, hopefully lots of people know you, and then maybe about how we met as well. I'd be really grateful. Thank you.
Well, my background is long and convoluted. I started as a designer, really, but mostly because I just had this passion for reusing. So I had a little brand, and we reused, first of all, abandoned clothing. We started in 1997, and then we progressed to pre-consumer waste in large quantities. My brand was called From Somewhere. It was really, really minute, but it did start a journey, certainly for me. It made me aware of, we were at that cusp, that moment when the industry moved from here to producing countries, literally at a very rapid pace. So I became aware of waste, I became aware of mass consumption, accelerated disposal, and that fed my creativity. My creativity was more poetic. I loved reusing things that were abandoned. It told me a story. Each time I put together two pieces of fabrics that didn't really want to be together, it was a story, it was a narrative. And it brought me to become the co-founder and curator of Estetica, which was the sustainable fashion area at London Fashion Week, which is where we met. But I actually met your jacket way before I met you. And I remember it was during one of the vetting sessions. I think it was our second Estetica even. And your collection came in. And, from one kind of rubbish collector to the next, I could see that in every stitch, in every little shape, in everything that you were doing, despite the fact that you were just out of college and you were a baby, you had this set of
A
solutions.
6'5" baby.
But you know what moved me, and what still moves me, is when people put their creativity as a way of being a service. And you did that beautifully and imaginatively and consistently. And that's really what moved me, you know, to your jacket. And then, of course, when I met you in person, you know, we became, you know, it became, you know, more than that. You know, my respect for you has always been, you know, huge. And I was, you know, so proud to have you in Estetica. You really were a game changer, because you were young, you were fresh, you were brilliant, and you defied that stigma of, you know, sustainability or ethics being crunchy and sort of alpaca itchy socks and all of that. You know, you had this real aesthetic to go with it, to go with your principles, to go with your collection, and a huge intelligence. And for me, that moves me, because for me, designers are people who look for solutions, not people who create problems. And, you know, so that was, you know, the long time ago. I think it was 2007.
Yeah,
Something
yeah,
like that.
just after 2009, and
Oh, nine. Whoa.
yeah, 2009 was the first time that we showed at sort of Christopher Avon the early parachute pieces at London Fashion Week, and you know, thank you so much for the kind words there. But I think as well that the key to all of this is that it's been about the pathfinders, right? You know, for me personally, in my brand, and so much of tonight actually is hopefully about learning and hopefully imparting some knowledge. You know, I've been so grateful that there were people like yourself, you know, acknowledging the fact that I wasn't mad, step one. Or if I was mad, maybe it didn't
Takes one
matter.
to know one.
And yeah, exactly. And people like Suzanne Side-Fraser, who I know are calling here. But it does, I mean, the very nature of what we are trying to do within the industry, the very nature that when something is new, it's immediately sort of more difficult to understand, I think. You're sort of having to explain and almost develop a new narrative, often a new vocabulary. And what I think has been fantastic is certainly the way that vocabulary is actually developed over the last 10, 11 years. It now, to me, seems aeons ago, and it seems a very different world that we started in.
Yeah. Well, we were almost ashamed, weren't we? I mean, you know, we couldn't really say that we were sustainable. We had to hide it behind the clothing. We couldn't speak about a stitch and a principle at the same time. You know, we had to pretend that it was all just terribly mainstream, and then bang, at the end of it, slip in this kind of slight, oh, by the way, guess what? I think that that's really changed. I think that we've made a point that, you know, that there is incredible design and incredible commitment that doesn't really need to be justified, you know, in the extent that it is. It has to be sustainable. The sustainability, the ethics, and the principles are what drives this design, what drives this aesthetic. And for me, Estetica was a very magic place. I mean, Estetica was also, for me, the beginning of this sense of bringing people together. I mean, I remember when we started the mentoring scheme within Estetica, and I remember saying, well, these guys don't need any mentoring in sustainability because they're all sustainable designers. So for us to bring you in close contact with Suzanne, and, you know, at the time it was also Yasmin Sewell who was really working with us as one of the mentors, was a really interesting correlation, because it was bringing people from the total mainstream to have the courage to really put their time and really, you know, mentor and stay close to brands such as yourself. I think that was unique for Estetica, this really nurturing and collaborative spirit. And I'm still grateful for all the people who passed through those doors and contributed.
Absolutely. And that word collaboration is key. You know, it really is in all of this. And I think it's so important that we all work together, and we work transparently, and we work to support one another. Second there, I think on all levels of the industry.
I think if it does happen again, just for everybody in there, I have to probably step back and start again, but I'm here, so
we're all good also. But yeah, this sort of thought around collaboration in general just being absolutely key, and I think it's a really important thing to reinforce for this evening as well, because what we're really hoping to achieve today is very much about a collaboration and a conversation. And what I would say is we really welcome your comments, obviously, to anyone out there. And then any that maybe we don't get to today, we're hoping to answer things as we sort of go through. Please just write them on the comments, and myself and Orsa are really happy to get back to you, do whatever we can to help, and that's what this is all about. Certainly from my perspective, I wouldn't have been able to grow my brand without the support and collaboration of so many others. So with that, we're going to try and get into a little bit of semi-structure.
Yeah,
you imagine that?
Did you say that you had a glass of wine, or am I the only alcoholic in the room?
I've gone for a Danish cup of continental lager. So we'll cheers, and then we'll get going. So, very good.
There you go, but it's very nice. Cheers, Christopher.
And cheers to anyone out there. Please do have a drink.
Exactly. Wine o'clock.
Great. We will obviously just remind people that this really is about disruption today. So anyone that's joined a little bit late, we're going to get into things. And my first real question to you is that it's maybe an obvious one, but how has the last month actually been for you?
It's longer than a month for me. I'm Italian, and therefore I've been acutely aware of this crisis happening in a way before it hit our shores in the UK. I was actually in Milan for a project I'm doing with Sarah Maino and Luke's beautiful prize. And, you know, as we were there, literally the cities next to Milan were beginning to get into lockdown. And then by the time I left, within a week, Milan was in lockdown. Venice, which is where my family is from and my mother lives, is in lockdown. So it's been, you know, it's been a period of anxiety and claustrophobia. And to be honest with you, I really wanted to be this kind of superhuman woman, mending clothes as I skipped up and down the stairs while keeping my children's positive. Failed miserably. Self-discipline, zero. Quite a lot of angst. But at the same time, you know, hey guys, this is me. You know, everybody does their best, and everybody does their best to keep positive. What has been very interesting, though, because I am very curious as a person, is to imagine the future and know that this period is almost, we are all inside a history book. You know, everything that happens now will have consequences, culturally in particular, for years to come. That's what I tell my children anyway, that they will be, you know, they really are bang in the middle of a really complicated moment in history. And so there is the side of me that is curious, that is, you know, that wants to know more, and that's very peaked. I'm very interested in what's happening, and I'm analyzing, potentially over-analyzing what's going on. But my feeling is that we're witnessing so much suffering. We are seeing the suffering of the most vulnerable in our own communities and in a global community. And obviously this is saddening me hugely, but it is cementing my commitment further and further, because in a way, when things are so visible, that's when you can start acting. It's a little bit like transparency and public disclosure. You know, people don't really understand that transparency and public disclosure is not performance, it's visibility, but it's that first step that you can take in order to really think, okay, what can I bring to this table? You know, how can I be of service? How can my brain function in order to be helpful in this situation? And obviously, because I am the co-founder and creative director of Fashion Revolution, I have a massive opportunity to be able to use this platform to convey the feelings of my team and of our multiple global teams, and to look at the situation from so many different points of views. And that, I think, it's important. We can be stuck in our own home, and yet we need to keep the global picture very, very firmly in our head as well. And that is what I think this period of pause or reset, whichever we want to call it, it's calling us to do, you know, to find out more, to really embark the type of knowledge that will give us the right information to develop our own opinions. It's from our own opinions that we can start positive change and making that change sustainable. Fantastic.
Wow, it's a really beautiful way of putting it, that we are living in this history book, you know. It's a really charming way to look at things, and it's brilliant to see the comments coming through. I'm really glad as well. Many people had a cheers as we had our cheers. So again,
cheers. Another one.
Quite right too. It's you know, speaking about revolution, obviously that's been an amazing initiative that you've co-founded. It would be really good to just speak a little bit for the audience about exactly what Fashion Revolution stands for, and then also just maybe how it's been impacted, and again maybe how you've reacted to some of those things through the developments with COVID.
Well, so Fashion Revolution starts in 2013 as a result of the Rana Plaza. It's co-founded by myself and Carrie Summers, who you will remember because she was another of the designers in Estetica, with her brand Pachacuti, and half the people in the team were gyrating around the room as we were, you know, as visitors and participants. And so the team at Fashion Revolution is very much a team that understands this space. It's a team of people that have always worked in fashion. We love fashion. We're not negative about fashion. So the whole ethos of Fashion Revolution was to be a pro-fashion campaign, to speak this language, but to highlight the kind of fashion that we want to be a part of, rather than the kind of fashion that we have, you know, somehow thrown upon us and that we don't quite know how to, you know, we don't want to accept. It's now, we are now the biggest fashion advocacy movement in the world, believe it or not. And with
I do believe it. It's incredible. Of
so
course.
many and you know, we were talking about collaboration, and I've done precious nothing on my own in my entire life. You know, Estetica was a team. It was myself, it was Filippo, it was Anna Orsini, it was, you know, Suzanne and the people that took part. Fashion Revolution is equally a team, as my brand was a team. I can't do things on my own because I love to be connected with people that are way better than me. At doing different things. And that's the principle with Fashion Revolution. You know, we would be nothing without all of our country coordinators globally and their points of views, because, you know, we are all different. We all see different things in a different way, and we all have very different needs when it comes to the fashion industry, what we demand for the fashion industry, what we need in our communities from the fashion industry. So the idea that this global movement came and had the freedom to say, well, actually, this is what it's like in my country, this is what it's like in my country, and then communicate with each other to see how we can help and how we can better the situation as a global, really large global community. So this is where, you know, we are. And we started talking primarily about transparency, digging deeper into, you know, waste, accelerated disposal. We're now really talking about the composition of our clothes, collective action, the conditions of the garment workers. So we try and give accurate but incisive, you know, content, not sensationalistic. We don't say, you know, thank you or change the world. You know, we're accurate, we're simple. It's that kind of balance of saying things that are true.
Fantastic. And truly in that 7-year period, I mean, it is completely global, Fashion Revolution. Yeah. And so the sort of activities and things that have started on the 20th, so obviously earlier this week, really with the sort of mission among many of educating and inspiring, and it must give you a lot of pride just to see now that, again, you've started this platform and this initiative, but then to sort of empower designers and to people worldwide, it must give you a great deal of pride just to see what's coming the other way, and how people are stepping up and how people are kind of reacting and using that platform.
It's a funny thing, the word pride, because I have pride, but at the same time, it's a funny feeling, pride. More than anything, I am enthusiastic and excited. I mean, to have you've been supporting from the very start, and so are, you know, some of the most brilliant designers that I can think of. They're all in this big family, and we have an initiative that you know all too well because you've been involved in it since it started with Fashion Open Studio, and you're doing your amazing, you know, quick repairs, you know, workshop coming soon with Graham, which I'm so looking forward to.
We'll do a special shout out, shall we, for brother Graham over. So he'll be doing a sort of rapid repairs workshop on Thursday. Do look for the details on that, but learning how basically to keep clothing enduring and keeping it in circulation. Again, all of these ways that we can all look to reduce our impact, to do our bit, and they all tie together, right? I think that's what what this is all about. So yeah, super exciting, and I suppose it leads on really to then a kind of natural thought that, do you think this pause, this stop, a full stop, this, you know, this forced opportunity to rethink and maybe reset, you used earlier, I mean, that's a lovely way as well of looking at it. Do you think this really is a defining moment for the fashion industry, and importantly for the consumer as well, because it takes both, right? We need both.
Yeah, I mean, I think it is I think it definitely is a defining moment. I mean, unfortunately, I'm not so confident that we will, you know, skip into a rainbow of betterness the minute that we are allowed out of our home. You know, I think that the pressure will be on consumers to buy more, buy all the cheap discounted goods that are now piling up in warehouses, buy more in order to kickstart your economy. I mean, the UK economy, 80% of it is consumer. It's a consumer-led economy, and so many other global economies are. So it's going to be even harder for, you know, citizens to make that correlation between, you know, what should I buy and what should I refrain. And I actually think that, you know, the positive thing to think is that potentially people will be aware of how many clothes they've already got. What we are trying to do with Fashion Revolution is literally interrogate your wardrobe. Go through your clothes. Understand what are you made of? You know, how should I wash you? Are you made of polyester? That means that if I wash you, you will be, you know, releasing microfibers. Can I learn a better way of caring for this piece of clothing? Can this stop me buying from materials that I know have an impact? And but primarily for me, it's around the fact that what we are seeing now, the thing that interests me by far the most, is looking at a generation of kids that are growing up right now with a very different set of heroes. Because my kids have gone from Kim Kardashian to their local doctor. And we are now beginning to see that the people that save our lives, the people that make our life possible, the public workers, these are the people that we need to protect, respect, and adore, rather than, you know, the celebrities that we potentially, the pampered celebrities we shallowly adore, are being rather useless right now, let's face it. And I think that this will stick. And this will also influence fashion as well, because fashion calls itself aspirational, but who aspires at the end? Is it it's only the end consumer that is allowed to aspire. What about the supply chain workers? Why are they not allowed to aspire for a better life? And I think that this is the thing that I'm focusing on the most. I don't necessarily believe that we will all come out of here buying better and improving on our shopping habits. But I urge all of those ones who can, all of those who do have a, you know, roof over our head, all of those people who will still have purchasing capacity at the end of this crisis, to really commit and cement to better practices. Because at the end of the day, we are seeing something positive. You know, I see the sky, I see the stars in London at night. I've never seen the stars in London at night since the 80s. My mum was sending me photographs of ducks in the Venetian canals. You know, so there must be a balance, and this is what we've lost. You know, this is an industry that has lost, well, first of all, its efficiency, because, you know, we know the rapid speed and, you know, the way that we throw things away, you know, the fact that we don't care for the clothes because we just don't commit to them because they're so easy to get. And I think this is the moment to make, you know, a love story to the clothes that you already own, and commit to only including those pieces that really have meaning, even if it means finding weird ways of buying, sharing with your friends, repairing, you know, all of the kind of world that goes around maintaining the clothes that you've got.
Yeah, it's as always an amazingly passionate and provocative way of looking at things.
Well, you've pioneered that. You've pioneered that from the start. I mean, you know, when you start, you know, you're using your offcuts to make those amazing bags. I've got two. One of them is going to go to my granddaughter, sadly, soon. But hey, I mean, better for her than me.
That's perfect. If things are being handed off.
But you know, you had that in your design DNA, and it, you know, I know that, you know, because we know each other and we've worked together for such a long time, you know, I take it for granted, but it's really not something to take for granted. The fact that you encourage your customer to bring back things, you know, the fact that you encourage repairing, or even just talk about the concept of loving your clothes enough to want to repair them, that's, you know, in my mind, revolutionary. Because we
Yeah,
come
well,
opposite. We come from buy, wear, chuck. You know, I jokingly say that, you know, our ready to wear has turned into ready to waste. And, you know,
yeah,
we need to change that correlation, you know, in the near future, because we know we have to.
yeah, and that passion that you obviously speak about on this, it's almost like we need to translate that sometimes into the emotional attachment you have with clothing, right? Because
Yeah.
to your point, it's almost become this sort of wasteful thing. A question came through actually when we were speaking there. I mean, it's a difficult thing because there's always a danger you're speaking to yourselves, right? We assume, you know, you and I have known each other for a long time, and we've got very, very glad to have so many people following this conversation and being part of the conversation. But in the outside world, and we're speaking obviously into the outside world, but when we come through this, do we think for most people there might even be this danger, actually that rebound effect of really thinking, well, we have all been inside, because it's a real fear that I have, this glut of stuff, you know, that we're all going to be facing that comes out of this. And you know, the answer to all of this isn't let's make more stuff and buy more stuff, right? We really need to, something needs to change in
Yeah.
the mindset, right?
Well, there's a name for it, Christopher, which nearly gave me nightmares. It's called revenge buying. So apparently when we're out of here, and because we're going to want to party, we'll revenge buy. I can't think of a more hideous name. And I feel that this is what we're seeing right now, you know. So if there is something clear right now, is that our present system places profits before people and places growth before prosperity. And, you know, we don't protect the people that feed us, you know, the farmers that grow up are the poorest in the world. The people who make our clothes, we wear these clothes every day, are exploited and working in extremely dangerous conditions, you know, most of the time. And it's, you know, if we've basically turned the whole table upside down. I mean, you know, these are the people that are responsible for the functioning of our
Yeah.
life. And I hope that we'll, you know, that this moment in time, again, for those of us who can, is we have an obligation. I said, you know, to before that I don't want to use so much the word opportunity because it seems like a slap in the face of people
Yeah.
suffering. But obligation sits right within my instincts and within my stomach because I feel an obligation. And I know that most brands don't feel an obligation. But if citizens, consumers, and designers feel an obligation, that can be passed through. Because brands are always saying, you know, consumer demand, consumer demand. Well, let's start demanding what we want rather than another
Yeah, I
t-shirt.
mean, the idea,
17.
yeah, the idea of sort of returning to business as usual scares the hell out of me,
Yeah.
right? Because it didn't work then. It's not going to work in the future. So why the hell do we want to go back to it, right?
I don't know, but a lot of people do.
Yeah,
And that's
yeah,
trust. I mean, you know, this is I mean, I have to say, whenever I talk about fashion, I always say, you know, I kind of skip rope between one oxymoron to the next oxymoron. You know, you think you're doing something right, and then you look at the picture from the other side, and you know that you're failing miserably somewhere else. And you know, and this is this moment in time to actually embark knowledge. For me, knowledge. I don't like using military terms, but I've never found a better word than weapon. Knowledge is our weapon for mass education. And, you know, we need to engage. You know, if you think about it, we've all become experts of coronavirus in the space of a month. You know, we all know whether it's linked to SARS, how we're going to cure it, the vaccine, because we've taken the time to Google, to read, to decide whether this was fake information or real information. We need to do that about the clothes that we wear. We need to do that about our industry. We need to look at what we have been presented with and turn around and say, well, no, I do want clothes, but I also do want the stars at night. You know, I do want democratic, cheap, affordable clothing, but I have to know that it's made by people who are, you know, safe allowed to unionize, to collective bargain, and in an environment which, by the way, we all share this environment, an environment that is safe. But we need to take the time. We need to take the time to find out, to find those. There are so many organizations. We're nowhere near the only one. You know, so many organizations. There is for every taste, you know, for the really rampant campaigners, you know, working on social issues, to the super creative ones that just want to sit there and learn about darning. There is a little bit for everyone. And most importantly, we need to focus on you, you know, on you, the young designers, the emerging designers, the designers that really are bringing change into every step that you take. And they need support as much as the supply chain workers, because you guys too are at risk of losing your, you know, your customers and your jobs.
On a sort of side note, I took a Zoom call last Saturday from the 11-year-old son of one of the designers at Timberland. And this 11-year-old was so passionate, so researched, and so inspiring in his thoughts around the environment and why wasn't I doing more and why wasn't big, you know, and it was fantastic, you know, really, really humbling, and also very encouraging, because back to how we began, I think the narrative has changed so much, right? Even in the 10, 11 years. I made my first remade jacket in 2001 when I was on my degree. And I think that nearly 20-year period. And the truth about all of this is it's just common sense, right?
Yeah,
it's just going back to the ideas of make, do, and mend, valuing products, appreciating material, making things. All of these things kind of stack up, but we've ended up in this sort of mad race to the bottom, where it's more, and buy. And you know, we've had a few.
Is that you didn't deny that beauty. Many people deny the beauty of, you know, a beautiful stitch that can be repaired, you know, a piece of fabric that was obsolete and has been recuperated. You know, these are beautiful actions with a very strong, profound design aesthetic, as far as I'm concerned. And I actually, in terms of aesthetics, as you know, I mean, you know, you've been copied to smithereens, you know, the aesthetic of reusing is visible, and importantly so. But you never denied that beauty, you never denied that process. And more guys, more and more young designers are following in your footsteps. And that's really what needs to come through. I mean, this is a generation that wouldn't know a good hem if it, you know, if it, you know, they just don't have that culture. So even your responsibility in terms of making an amazing piece of clothing that, you know, where the seams sing out of beauty, that's very, very important, and a very, very important message.
Well, thank you. I mean, let's talk for a minute about the bigger brands. You know, there's many out there, perhaps without being naming any names, but you know, you and I have never been short of an opinion and things, but my observation, you know, through the work that you've done, you've worked with a lot of big brands, and sort of through that. And have you, again, found that maybe the narrative is changing from the early days, and maybe the confusion around what sustainability even was, to now your guidance and real genuine change? Or do you think even now, even with COVID, it's kind of lip service, or just to...
There's a lot of lip service, and I think we need a generational change within the brands. I mean, I'm not joking. I talk to every brand. You know, we really do. If there is one thing that we've achieved with Fashion Revolution, is communication directly with brands. That was also very much our attitude, because from the very beginning we decided never to shame individual brands, but never to thank them either. So we acknowledge the work that they do, and we very transparently, very honestly talk about what has been done. You know, it's very unjudgmental. It's just, you know, providing information. And to be honest with you, I mean, I don't make names, but obviously some are more inclined than others. But again, you know, you're skipping again the usual oxymoron. You know, some of the brands that are disclosing the most, some of the brands that are investing the most, are still producing the most. And so in a way, it's the negative offset. You know, any good action, any goodwill is somehow you know, swamped by an avalanche of way too much. So it feels like it's about finding balance. And I do think that with Corona, one of the potentials that we can see is that some of these brands will not make it, because ultimately when your product is cheap, when you pay your workers cheaply, when you're producing using fabrics that are too cheap because you're not paying. I was on a brilliant panel this morning with Nina Moranzi from the Sustainable Angle, who put it so eloquently. I don't know whether I can do it as eloquently as her, but things that are cheap, it's because we are not paying the cost of their impact. That's why cheap clothing is cheap, because we're not paying for the cleaning up, for the sludge, for the recycling, for all that really should happen if one was, committed to, a decent brand that didn't necessarily destroy the planet in the process of being made. Yeah. So my love, my work, and my passion remains with those ones that are embedding it from the very start. As I said, I can speak with any one of the big brands. I'm not fantastically hopeful for the majority of them, although at the end of the day, I think that there will be a shift. So brands have given us what they wanted us to have. It's rubbish that consumers demanded cheap clothing. We didn't. It arrived and we bought it, but we bought it because we didn't know where it came from. We didn't know how it was made. Imagine in the 80s, if a brand had told you, yep, there you go, this t-shirt costs £3, but it's got azo dyes in it, it's got polyester, it's polluting the river where it's been made of, and guess what? It's so cheap because we're not paying the garment workers. I think less people would have bought it, frankly, but we were denied all of that knowledge. So brands are now potentially having to give us what we really want, but we need to ask what we really want. And in my case, what I really want is dignity. The people who make our clothes treated in a dignified way, factories that work without endangering people's lives, and all the adequate technology to ensure that when it comes to the environmental footprint, everything is being done to minimize it. I mean, that's fashion. I mean, why should fashion destroy? Fashion really ought to enrich your life rather than put you physically in danger and everybody else. I mean, we know the washing of polyester, the releasing of microfiber, the dyes, the toxicants. So, we need to demand a fashion that doesn't affect our planet quite so much.
And, I think understanding that certainly many people are realizing that, buying less but buying better makes sense, right? We're empowered, and sorry to speak in a sort of business sense, but we are empowered by our wallets to a certain degree, right? Yeah. And that's our way of sort of vocalizing to the brands, right? So that has to be the real game changer in all of this, or part of the game changer. The hope is absolutely, that we should be, as I say, buying less but buying better. But we do need to find the right balance. I mean, people need affordable clothing, right? So this, we're not suggesting a kind of reckless,
totally.
Change here.
But the responsibility for, cheap and affordable clothing, that's entirely on the brands. They need to make cheap and affordable clothing and find the way to make it cheap and affordable without, exploiting people and resources. And we also need to go back to a different ways of buying. I mean, I'm very old. I have 4 children and 2 grandchildren. And, to be honest with you, when I was younger, expensive clothes didn't mean that you just put your hand up and say, oh, fuck it, it's expensive clothing, I can't afford it. You get 3 or 4 girlfriends together, you'd put your pocket money together, you'd buy a skirt and you'd wear it together. And there are some, I've been making this particular example. I've just received my Chopavalowena skirt, which I'm in love with. And, I'm greedy and old and all that, but if I'd been younger, I could have bought that with maybe 3 or 4 of my girlfriends, because it's designed in such a way that it can be worn by multiple people. Same as many of your clothing. I mean, again, I'm not such a sharer, but they do get nicked by my daughters. And, the point is, there are creative ways of buying clothes that would still allow for people to to be able to afford, one piece of designer clothing rather than 25 dresses of boohoo.
Yeah,
at the end of the day.
I mean, the sort of thought in all of this, and back to that disruption, this sort of opportunity is the wrong word, but this obligation. I love the fact that you called it an obligation. Our obligation, designers, individuals, brands, all, is to think about what these new systems, and I think it's a series, right? It's not going to be one system, but there's so much that I think excites us at RÄBURN when I think about the repairability, rejuvenation, the fact that now, again, even the technology has changed so much in 10 years that we're so close to really closing the loop on the one hand around kind of synthetics. And then we had a question earlier around, well, sustainability maybe not being enough. What about regeneration, right? And I'm sure maybe that's something that you're passionate about as well in terms of regenerative agriculture, rubber, cottons, all of those things as well. Things are changing.
Things are changing, and I'm passionate for having a very open mind. I read an article the other day that said, "Oh, renting will save the world." No. What will save the world is designers committing to whatever fits their signature. So, I mean, you've been really, really clever because you know what you want to do, and it's embedded in what you do, and you've carried it through, and to me,
sorry to interrupt. It's not that I knew what to do. It's what I knew we didn't want to do.
Yeah.
Actually.
Well, there you go.
I suppose that's always what we've tried to do at RÄBURN. We've always tried to find other ways, to evolve and grow a business in a positive way. And I'm really sorry because I kind of stopped you mid-flow. The only thing I knew when I left the RCA was I didn't want to go and work for a big brand. I didn't want to get sucked into the machine. Yeah. And then all of a sudden, well, if you don't want to go and work for anyone else, you kind of have to start your own thing, right? Yeah. And then all of a sudden, it sort of evolved almost as a happy accident from there. So, yeah.
Happy that you had that kind of, from the very start, every collection that you produced had something new to give. Whether it was around longevity, whether it was around silhouette, whether it was, as I said, your clothes for me are, day, night, afternoon nap, whatever, the function, and that they're worn all the time for a reason. But it takes intelligence to pinpoint that design process, and it takes guts because especially at the time when you were doing it. But what I'm seeing now is that more than before, and you pioneered this, you and a few others. I'm thinking, designers such as Katie Jones, again from but creating not just the collection, but the system that is needed for the collection to thrive. And thriving is not just how it hangs at London Fashion Week, it's how it performs once it's inside a wardrobe. And that to me is incredibly important because, once we buy the clothes that we buy, we are responsible for the rest of their lives. So, we are.
It really is that partnership. Yeah, absolutely.
We are in the middle of the fashion supply chain ourselves as consumers. So there's not much point talking about, all the amazing stuff that has to be done before, if then when it comes to us, it goes into the bin within, 2 weeks. We also have a responsibility, but how do you interact with the clothing if you don't know who made it, if you don't know what it's made of, if you can't smell that fabric and think, oh gosh, where did that weave come from? Where does that tartan? What's the history of that tartan? So it's about conveying that narrative. Clothes tell stories. We tell stories with the clothes that we wear. Every day that I wear something, it tells me and it reminds me of several moments in my life where things happened to me. Yeah. That's why I love them, because they are mine.
So it really is that emotional attachment again, and second skin. Yeah.
Yeah.
Fantastic. So also, I'm mindful of time because you and I could talk forever, right?
You and I can talk for about 25 years.
And obviously, I just want to make sure we really do involve the audience a little bit in this. So when we put the posts out earlier, in fact, I think it was last week, we again invited people to ask questions of any of us really, and I'd like to just ask a few, and they'll kind of pinball around. I think that's quite good.
Are you reading them? I have to read them.
No, no, don't worry. The good news is I've got them here, so I'm gonna read. This one's kind of linked. This is from Madeline Walnut, and she asked what percentage of the fashion industry overall do we sort of think is really open for change, and really obviously with the idea of it being better for people and planet. And we've kind of touched on this, and yeah, it's maybe
So
it's a
the
tricky
percentage,
one.
because I basically cannot count. I'm just about the most dysnumeric person that ever crossed the industry. So I think we can talk more than percentages. I think that we can talk about attitudes. And again, I don't know whether the big guys are paying lip service. Some of the brands that some of the big brands I have spoken to feel genuine. And don't forget, the brands are made of people. And very often people really do want to do the best for them and their company.
Yeah.
But the attitude is radically shifting and radically changing when it comes to the younger designers. So I'm super privileged because I work with the team for the Central St. Martin's MA. I also regularly teach in other colleges, and I mentor regularly from literally all over the world. I have mentees in India, in Hong Kong, in Eastern Europe, and in the UK, and that's the change, because these guys are not paying lip service, and these guys are not compromising, even if it's so much harder for them, bless them. So percentage incremental every year. And I had a really interesting experience the other day at Central St. Martin with the year ones. My colleagues, Fabio Piras, brilliant, and Louise Gray, and I had a group. And we talked to them about saying, well, when you will have your brand. And they took the word brand as being offensive. They don't want to be called brands. They much rather imagine themselves as sort of makers in a high street, something a cross between haute couture and artisan. But it shows how how their attitude has changed. So in that case, I can give you a very big percentage. That was 99.9%, because out of a group of 50, only one of them didn't really talk about this. All of them were in agreement that they want to redefine the concept of what being a brand is. And they talk about listening to you speak and listening to people such as Richard Malone speak as what really inspires them, as opposed to LVMH, Vivienne Westwood, the big CSM provides incredible talks with all of the amazing designers, but the heroes for them are you and your lot, and the smaller brands that are reinventing and renavigating the high street and your own stores. So
there's hope. So there's hope. Yeah.
So there is, oh my God, yeah. I mean, there is hope.
Okay. So the next one I think it's a brilliant question, very specific to COVID, and very thoughtful. So all of a sudden, we're doing everything we can to support our local grocers, and we're doing all of this, and we're all being amazed at these food boxes that maybe are being delivered, and incredible value, and people are starting to think, well, I don't need to go to the supermarket, right? And maybe it's a real change long term. Do you think we're going to see the same happening with clothing when we come out with this shift really to local and really that reappreciation?
I do. Yeah. So basically, for me, that there is a kind of a double stick here. We talk a lot about mending, repairing, and yet I always need to be acutely aware of the fact that if you're a single mother with 4 kids, mate, you're not going to go home and repair their trousers when they've come out of school. You've got a whole load of other things to think of. Why isn't the local council providing those mending services and placing them in a place where they are easily discoverable? And I don't mean, I love local dry cleaners, but how about something a little bit more, imaginative and somehow, with, again, more knowledge and more understanding. And I do think that we will see a shift towards what's local to us. But it's not going to happen unless we ask for it. So that's the main thing, So whoever asked that question, ask it to us, but ask it to your community. Go to your local school, go to your local church, your local gym, and say, where is that workshop on mending? How can I start something within my community that reminds my community that we can actually be, you know, providing autochthonous solutions that are unique to our tiny, weeny little area? Because, I mean, one of the most, I live near Brixton. Brixton used to have a huge, you know, a lot of people were out of work, but could they crochet? They crocheted beautifully, generations and generations of this incredible, you know, craft coming out of their hands. How do we revalue that in, you know, in the age of Primark, H&M and Zara? You know, how do we really connect with those skills that we have forgotten, and yet they are part of our femininity, part of our culture, part of the global culture? And, you know, in London, how amazing that they all make. So I think that, you know, it's incredibly important that we come out of this period saying, well, I want that. I'm not going to buy this. I want that. You know, I want a place to mend my clothes. I want the workshops. I want the systems, and I want to be, you know, listened.
Yeah, one of our younger team members at RÄBURN had an amazing comment that she said to us. Emily had this great statement of, what did you do during the coronavirus? You know, what did you do? What are you going to look back on? And again, remember, hopefully be proud of. How did you change yourself for the better? And it's that, isn't it? It's not just personal, it's everything. It's the industry, and not just within fashion. We've got this unique moment, of course, again, and that obligation. I should say that was from Lipstick Lorry, that last one, charmingly named. And the next question's from Karina Hobbs. So this is actually really changing gears. She would like to know what role we think digital fashion is going to change in that new system. Because I think we're all excited about it, right? But then it's kind of, it's then what's the step into it? And we know it's kind of going to change something, but we're not quite sure how.
So only I mean, basically, I'm really granny when it comes to technology, but I am obsessed because, as I said, I am just so bloody curious. And I'm now really interested in digital technology. So what interests me about technology is a technology that connects primarily with our instincts first. So when we talk about transparency, for instance, transparency is very technical. It's around publishing your supply chain, your data, analyzing this, analyzing that. But it serves a very basic need, because up until, you know, however many years ago, 20, 30, 40 years ago, you instinctively knew the provenance of clothing and who made them. You know, like a really beautiful wool jacket, you didn't need to know that was the wool would have come from Italy, but the tailoring was English. I mean, would you have bought Converse, say, in France? No, you'd bought Converse in the US, and tailoring was, you know, English, and the, you know, the beautiful suit or whatever that came from Italy. So it connects, even though it's a very technological, say, blockchain, blah, blah, it connects us to something that we understand. So the other day, I finally had my breakthrough. I was at a talk with this brilliant organization called Textiler, and they were talking about virtual clothing. And I was like, oh my God, what is virtual clothing? What do you mean? I mean, I love the little ears, you know, that you get on here. Yeah. Probably going to put them on in a minute. But I
wouldn't know how to.
I'm a girl. I used to play with those dolls. You know those paper dolls that had those little bits, and then you would fold the paper doll.
Yeah, over the top.
Yeah, that's technology now. So we will be inundated with paper doll type clothes. And I can't wait. You know, eventually in the future, I will be able, while I speak to you, press a button and, I don't know, have this amazing shawl all over me, or a crown, or, you know, temporary clothes for a temporary moment. And I believe that our wardrobes will look different. You know, the basics that we will have will be really well made. They'll have to last a long time because we can play with technology.
It's a brilliant answer, and it actually links. We've got another one from Henry, who he was really interested by the book that I'm sure you've read, by Patagonia, Let My People Go Surfing. And the great thing, I mean, we've all got a great respect, I think, for Patagonia, and they seem to have that balance, right, of life and work, and, you know, maybe not taking the business too seriously, and they're growing this really positive company. And then when you put it through the lens all of a sudden of COVID and the fact that we've all learned that actually we can work from home, we can do, we start to rethink what I suppose the future's going to look like for us working, you know. And I always say to myself, I never go to work, you know, I go to the studio, and I've almost tried to eradicate that. But anyway, this idea that are we going to completely, again, step away from maybe our traditional way of being in physical spaces, and with it the clothing, and to your point, with the digital then coming into that, how amazing. You don't need that wardrobe of clothes behind you, because actually...
Oh, I do. Don't get me wrong. Don't think that I will. I'm old-fashioned.
But maybe you don't need the whole wardrobe, right?
No, totally. And I mean, you know, for me, clothing is about playing with them. I mean, the reason why I have so many clothes and I can't get rid of them is A, because I wear them. I mean, I really genuinely change a lot. You know, I don't have a wardrobe, you know, I don't have a uniform. I love playing with my... But the concept that we can play with real clothes, with fake clothes, you know, technology is amazing. And I've never thanked the world more for technology more than now. I mean, you know, I've got my mum, she's on her own in Venice, age 84. I can Skype with her every day. I mean, imagine what I would feel like if I didn't have that opportunity, if I had to rely on a phone call, you know, without seeing her. It's made me feel safe to know that I can look at her face, see her body language, and understand that she is or she isn't okay. So, you know, for me, really, it's always, and I don't like rhetoric. You know, people often talk about some idealized fashion industry from the past. Crap. Fashion was born exploitative. We're talking slavery, we're talking cotton production, we're talking the East India Company, we're talking shops in Victorian, you know, in Victorian UK. So it's not just about looking back. I always say we need to look back to move forward.
Absolutely.
So we have to really, you know, take heart of the fact that as humans, we have this precious need to evolve. But surely evolution is about becoming better rather than becoming worse. And in that sense, I feel that technology can play, you know, a very important part. But it needs to be warm. I don't know whether that makes sense, but warm technology.
I mean, absolutely. It almost feels like that's brought us full circle. You know, we started with disruption and this ongoing kind of conversation around our obligation of using this time wisely. But it really does feel that for the first time, we've got all the right ingredients to bake a new cake.
Yeah. I'm a terrible cook, but I'll follow you.
And I think it's so important that we use them in the right way. And I really hope personally that we use this unique moment to galvanise so many of these conversations, because I think even in the last 55 minutes or so, and we've gone way over the time we were hoping to do.
We predicted that.
No, of course, but then it seems the breadth of things is so healthy, and if we can pull that together, we'll really be in a better shape.
But you know, the industry has been quite mean. You know, it relies on, you know, this is me and you're not wanted. You know, this is my playground. Who are you? And I think that what certainly you have demonstrated, you know, throughout your career, and one of the reasons why we're still here talking, is that we're both generous people. And at the end of the day, kindness, generosity. I mean, it may not be decadent, but it doesn't mean that it's not, you know, fun or brilliant or glorious or creative. You know, a lot can be given and a lot can be taken, and creativity can really thrive when your ego and your creativity, as I said, is put to good use. And I feel that this is something that we need to, you know, the smaller things, that kind of the quiet things, we need to consider them. We've had years of, you know, utter decadence, and now, you know, fashion is cyclical. So I think that now we will connect with purpose, and you know, purpose is a lovely word, and you know, small is a lovely word. Helen Crowley from Caring very much inspired me during one of her talks, saying that nature doesn't upscale naturally, but it does replicate what is successful. May there be another 20,000 Christopher Raeburns in the future, if you see what I mean. You know, replicate the because the good
that's a
has
scary.
the generosity to